Two. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shavleen Kaur, Membership and Welfare Officer at AIFEST, your anchor of this session. And after the wonderful and enlightening session by Dr. Manu Mangatu and paper presentation by some amazing scholars, I welcome you all in the afternoon session. And especially, I would like to welcome and introduce our resource person, Shatarupa Mishra. Welcome, ma'am. Shatarupa Mishra is an assistant professor of English at Model Degree College, Odisha. She completed MA in English from the University of Hyderabad and she was awarded the Sarojini Naidu Memorial Trust Gold Medal by the university in 2010. She has over 10 years of teaching experience and her research interests include post-colonial eco-criticism, post-humanism, and memory studies. Her short story, titled Creation, is published as part of an e-book, Esmeralda's Here and Other Stories. Her poems have been published by Aerothanatos, a peer-reviewed quarterly journal on literature, and the Knot magazine, USA. Her research articles have been published in national e-journals. She has presented papers in national and international conferences, and she has been the convener of various national level webinars on communication skills in English. Today, she will be talking about of postmodern sandcastles, gutters, graphic novels, and the pain of effacement. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shavleen, for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. And this is just a continuation of the wonderful sessions we have been having since morning, I believe. Um the title of my talk is, as Shavleen said, of postmodern sandcastles, gutters, graphic novels, and the pain of effacement. Now, you must be wondering why all of a sudden this mental leap to the sea beach, because that is where we find sandcastles. There is a reason. Let me present my slides and then I will continue. Please give me a minute. Is my screen visible, Shavleen?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay, thank you. So, we'll begin by talking about sandcastles. Before we talk about its connection, if any, with postmodernism, I would like to do some physics. The science behind sandcastle has to do with the interaction between water and sand. The water molecules coat the grain of sand and hold them together, forming bridges in the gaps between the grains. Too much water turns into a lubricant and the sandcastle collapses. Too little water and the surface tension can't hold the sand grains together. Thus, the act of building a sandcastle requires precision. Now, that precision presupposes, of course, the knowledge of the nature of granules and something about the capillary action in bridging the gaps between the sand grains. However, this act also includes in it the possible spectacle of the sandcastle being washed away by the waters, and hence the likelihood of more sandcastles of vulnerability. Now, I would like to begin with this. Man lies at the intersection of the material and the cognitive, and this fuels in him a search that always begins at the end. Now, let me go to the next slide and you will get a better idea of what I am talking about. This is also a picture of a sandcastle. Actually, this has been taken from a graphic novel titled Sandcastle, which is composed by Frederick Peters and Pierre Oscar Levy. And if you know this, if you're aware of this text, you know that recently a movie has been made on this particular narrative, and it is titled Old. It's by M. Night Shyamalan. So why, this slide? No, I just wanted you to make that transition between the first photograph that I showed you of a sandcastle and this extract from that narrative, which shows you another sandcastle, but it has got some context. There is some aspect about this picture which tells you that a certain movement has happened, something has happened in between. Somewhere you see that end, and this is where our mind begins to question. If this was supposed to be a simple idea of building a sandcastle, why do we see a dead man there? Now, I'm not going to go into the details of the story, as I would like you to read this graphic novel if possible. But I just want you to think about this transition. What could have brought about this transition? Now, this search is an important aspect of postmodernity, which insists on knowing but carries within it the randomness that makes the knowledge and its object fragile. For that matter, and this is something which I found interesting as I was wondering about the word eureka used by Archimedes, to show that he was successful in finding something. Now, when I thought about that word, I could hear another sound embedded in that word, which somehow fractured the success involved in the word eureka. As you can see, eureka, it includes the sound of this word wreck. So even when we see or we feel that we have found something, in it there lies some aspect which may wreck what you seem to have found. And this particular aspect also comes under the concept of sonic agency. This is actually a theory given by Brandon LaBelle, and this is a very important direction to follow, because nowadays whatever we see, any kind of resistance, any kind of opposition, any kind of questioning, we see it visually, whether it is the print media, whether it is the electronic media, we see everything visually, whether they are narratives or whether they are resistances to those narratives. But Brandon LaBelle talks about sonic agency. Without anything being seen, can sound make a difference? Can sound bring about a rupture in a narrative? can sound be the means of resistance? And by this, he means sound which is not visual, which is invisible, but still it has potency, it has agency. And that is what set me thinking about this word, eureka. Then, let's move on. The second half of my title has two words which go together, gutters and graphic novels. Now, if you read the book Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud, you will find yourself face to face with the universe of the comics, a combination of words and iconic images, an interaction between panels and gutters. Now, what you see on screen is to show you this interaction between panels and the spaces between them, which we refer to as gutters in the language of comics. Now, McCloud gives a basic reason why comics is perceived as a postmodern genre. And let us go through this extract. I believe it is trying to tell us something very important. Now, McCloud has drawn himself. He is the person who is talking to us, and I would say there can be not a better example of self reflection or self referentiality, which we talk a lot about in connection with postmodernism, drawing attention to the medium. Now, McCloud says, and here is directly in conversation with us, the readers, I doubt it you would have been far too aware of the messenger to fully receive the message. Apart from what little I told you about myself, in chapter 1, I am practically a blank slate. It would never even occur to you to ponder what my politics are, or what I had for lunch, or where I got this silly outfit. I'm just a little voice inside your head, a concept. You give me life by reading this book and by filling up this very iconic form. Who I am is irrelevant. I'm just a little piece of you. But if who I am matters less, maybe what I say will matter more. That's the theory, anyway. Just now, before I started talking, we were just listening about how a reader, yes, is given the freedom, but with freedom comes responsibility. And that is the responsibility that Scott McCloud is talking about. What we see are fragments. These panels, they fracture time as well as space for us. But what we do is look at them together, trying to weave a narrative. So then, what do these gutters actually mean? What do these blank spaces between panels actually mean? Are they inviting the readers to do something in between those panels? That is the question which we'll be exploring today. Now, what we see here calls to mind Marshall McLuhan's well-known idea, the medium is the message. The most important thing about media is not the message that they carry, but the way that medium affects human consciousness and society at large. When we interact with inanimate objects, and that we do almost on a daily basis, we invest them with our identities and awareness. And let me go to the next slide, which will just show you. Just a minute, we are lost. Yes. Yes. Just look at this particular extract from Understanding Comics. Now, a person is seen driving a car. The car is inanimate. But at any given point of time while the person is driving it, the whole car and not just the parts is there in our minds. That is what this particular panel is trying to tell us. The vehicle becomes an extension of our body. It absorbs our sense of identity. We become the car. So this is applicable to all the inanimate objects which we are interacting with. It may be clothes, it may be our computer, it may be the internet, it may be the social media, it may be anything which, we are interacting on a daily basis, and we are investing our identities with those things. So then, what do we do with this proposition? We become the car. This is something we need to think about. So then, it's also something to wonder, when we are reading a graphic novel, do we become the panel or do we become the gutter? That depends on how we perceive things. If objects belong to the sensual world, identities belong to the conceptual. The comic book or graphic novel might use the play of all our senses. And I say all our senses, not just the eyes. On the surface, it might seem that this is a medium which employs only our eyes. No, we can hear things from the way the words would be written, the sound bites would be there. We can taste things from the way, let us say, a kitchen would be depicted, water boiling would be shown. Okay, we can feel things, from the way motion would be shown, right, in between panels. So I would say this is a medium which employs all our senses, not just the eyes, though primarily it seems to be a visual medium. But actually, it is multimodal. It has lines, shades, images, figures, geometric shapes, symbols, thought bubbles, sound bites, and so on. But this multimodal world of comics hints at multiple possibilities, multiple perceptions, multiple negotiations. And this brings me to a concept put forth by Brian Massamy about the margin of maneuverability. And this word is important. How we maneuver things. We'll be surrounded by so many things. How we maneuver them, how we find our way. So this margin of maneuverability, that any static, claustrophobic, incomprehensible situation allows a human being. An emotion or thought that we observe in ourselves is one out of the many possible ways of affecting and being affected. How far we can call this freedom is something to be explored. And yes, we are going to do that exploration right now. I will be talking about the graphic novel Sandcastle, as I have already shown you. This narrative, and I call it a narrative, trusting the panels that seem to follow, a sequence. Now, this narrative introduces us to some individuals who find themselves unable to escape the closure defined by cliffs, water, sand, sky, forest, and an invisible force field. Everything seems to be natural except the force field. And this is something which I want you to observe closely. The panels which you see on the left, they belong to the first page of the graphic novel, and the panels which you see on the right, they belong to the last page of the novel. So many events happen, so many perplexing situations we see. But as readers, we can just concentrate on these two pages and try to make meaning out of what we see. The same thing, building a sandcastle, you will find on the last page of the novel, but the person who is doing it does not seem to be happy about it. There seems to be some compulsion about it. It seems as if the person is drawn towards this activity, as if she is forced to do this activity, as if there is no other way. And this is something to think about. Is that compulsion related to this claustrophobic situation that we can see even on the first page? There seems to be no way out, neither on the first page nor on the last. And this is something we need to think about. This enclosure has an element of Eco-Gothic in it that has the agency to age everyone at a maddening pace. They vacillate between individual memories and collective memories. They think about their older selves, and for that they don't have to wait for a long time. With every turn of the page, they find themselves much older. Okay, this is what makes that place have an element of Eco-Gothic, as I said. This brings me to an important part of our living. Often when we are going through a difficult phase of our life, we are told to live in the present. But present is fashioned and refashioned by what has gone by and what we anticipate. Living in the present need not be a suggestion. We are living in the present. There can be no other way. And that present will have elements of the past and elements of the future in it. We cannot avoid it. Now, in any sequence of panels, the one on the left would denote the past, since that moment has given way to the next. And the one on the right would denote something which is yet to come. Now, when we are looking at the space in the middle. Now, that would seem natural in a narrative, but unfortunately, when we look at the whole page, we do not follow that sequence. We take in everything that our eyes can consume and everything together. Now, I want you to look at this page from the novel. The thing that you see on the left is actually the whole page where these people, they have just started talking about the bizarre thing that is happening to them in this particular enclosure. They are starting to question their compulsive aging, and they are starting to explore the various reasons that could lead to it. Now, this particular person whom you see on the right, and I have taken it out for you to see it in detail, That particular person is incidentally a science fiction writer, and he is caught in this impossible situation. And he says, your Arab has undergone the same thing as Robert and myself. The young girl probably did too, except that she must have drowned after being knocked out. We are in a trap here. Every half hour is equivalent to a year of our lives. I did the calculations based on the age of your children. This is what it says. Now, when you come back to the left side and you see how it has been positioned in the whole page, you will see that every other panel has a borderline, but this is the only panel which lacks a border. This is the only panel which lacks a skin. And MacLeod says that any such panel could have an element of timelessness in it. This panel, because it does not have a skin, seems to extend to all other panels and to the consciousness of the reader. Now, what could be the import of this craft by the graphic novelist? Now, I set about thinking, and I thought these words which he says, every half hour is equivalent to a year of our lives. We have to think harder. I would say this is not an innocent comment on the calculations that he has done. It is something that makes us come back to the language of comics. Every space between panels may require you to think harder because it carries the possibility of 1,000 interpretations. And the interpretations may span different time frames, different spaces, both physical and ideological. Now, these transitions between panels may be moment to moment, action to action, subject to subject, scene to scene, aspect to aspect, and non sequitur, which means there is no logical connection whatsoever between one panel and the next. Now, these are some divisions that MacLeod has made to make the readers aware of how they are to make connections between panels when they are going through a graphic novel. So moment to moment, the movement is very slow, where we see transition from one moment to the next. Action to action, we concentrate on the action that is happening and the motion involved in it. Subject to subject, we see in one particular action how different people are involved at the same time. Scene to scene, this is something which may give the gutter the potency of moving apart from each other by, let us say, a span of few years, a span of few generations. It has that kind of potency when we move from scene to scene. Aspect to aspect, it will concentrate not on movement but on stillness. When there is a particular still moment, and the different aspects of that movement, of that moment, how they will be connected. This is that kind of a transition. And of course, the last one is where we have no evident connection, but even then the reader is expected to do something in the gutter and try to bring those two panels together somehow. Now, this expectation from the reader to watch fragments and perceive them as a whole is what we call closure. So it is the responsibility, or let us say the fate, of the reader to see connections where there might be none. So that is something we need to think about, how free the reader is to have those closures. And Do those closures satisfy the reader? Now, whatever we talked about till now, is this confusing? Yes, because the gutters seem to be silent. And when we are face to face with silence, no, absolute silence where there is nothing, obviously there is something maddening about that. Now, is nothingness debilitating or is nothingness powerful? That is what we need to think about. This brings me to the last part of my title, The Pain of Effacement. And I would like to talk a little bit about, since I'm talking of pain, about illness and what it has to do with this whole concept of panels and gutters that I have been talking about. Until we are healthy, we hardly question life. But the moment we experience pain or discomfort, we have a lot of questions on our mind. We see pain as an aberration, as something that lies outside our horizon of perception. A French surgeon, René Leriche, wrote in 1936 that health is, and I quote, life lived in the silence of the organs. Health is life lived in the silence of the organs, unquote. Now, once this silence is broken, we need the doctor who explains to us the reason of our pain and then gives us medicines to relieve us of our pain. End of story. Now we go on about our lives as before, investing energy to the more important matters. It is interesting to note that modern medical treatises see pain as something to be puzzled about, yes, but something to be ultimately conquered. If you notice the titles of those treatises, they would be something like the challenges of pain, the puzzle of pain, and how to conquer pain. These words would be used. But gradually, even this attitude is changing. And that is why we see a coming together of the medical and the literary. Pain is now being seen as no more a mere sensation, but a matter of perception. How much do we think of pain as an opportunity to go where nobody else has been? And that means knowing more too. Sometimes people feel that they are more alive when they are going through extreme pain. And thus, pain is perceived to be actually intellectual, cerebral. From what we have gone through collectively in the last 2 years, we see that we cannot make a demarcation between the mental and the physical. And here I would like you to look at this particular, it's a painting, okay, and this painting, it's George Dergalis' painting titled Anguish. Now it is interesting that the painter chose to title this Anguish when it is actually supposed to be a representation of a headache, since it is part of the headache art exhibition which happened in 1989. Now, I would like you to just look at this painting, not putting it in the context of anything else. Just, look at this painting without contextualizing it, without thinking of it as something which you have to do as part of being as part of this conference or as part of listening to a lecture. Just forget everything and look at this painting. What do you perceive? I would just like you to spend a minute or so telling yourself what you perceive. Do you see panels? Do you see gutters? Do you see moment? Or do you see motion? Do you see mental pain? Or do you see physical pain? Do you see a unification of fragmented sensibilities or fragmentation of a unified sensibility? What do you see? That is something you need to tell yourselves. Now, the number of narratives we are flooded with these days about isolation and lockdown trauma, about the almost baffling sense that no one can take your place on your sick bed. These narratives give us a hint about the power of effacement. I say power. The power of removing boundaries between the mental and the physical, and the power of removing language from the molds we are habituated with. I would like to take a pause here and a distraction. I would like you to look at this particular poem. It's a poem in Spanish titled Passage. And this poem can be seen as a painting which carries something like pictures, only here pictures are not pictures, but pictures are made up of words. Paysage actually refers to a landscape or the representation of a landscape. It employs words in varied fonts and cases. You can see, both capital letters and small letters here, in such a way that on the page you perceive some kind of motion in stillness. The artist is the Chilean poet Vicente Huidobro, who initiated the literary movement called creationism. Now, there are two reasons why I talk about this artistic expression, this modernist artistic expression in a conference on postmodernism. First, here I see that the words take on a pictorial quality, and this movement towards a visual medium is what I have been discussing till now. The second reason I will soon be sharing with you. But before that, let us just read what this poem is all about and what is, the thing that we find on the left-hand side of the page. In the evening, we will stroll down parallel paths, the moon in which you look at yourself. The tree was higher than the mountain, but the mountain was so wide it projected beyond the earth's edges. The flowing river contains no fish. Do not play on the freshly painted grass. A song leads the sheep toward the stable. Now, what is happening here? What do we see here? We see that the line which refers to moon, that line itself shows us a moon. The line which talks about the flowing river looks like cascading water. So what is this movement? They are supposed to, because there is this word we, it is understood that there are two lovers who are taking a stroll, and they come across, if you go to the last line, the only person that they come across maybe is a shepherd who is leading his sheep towards a stable. That is the movement that is happening. And they enjoy the moonlight, and the moon also seems to be looking at them because there is a word in the middle which makes it look like an eye. So, this concept of if we are observing something, we are also being observed, that transition has happened, you know, in just one line, the way it has been portrayed in the poem. So, just I wanted you to think about this poem and why is it shaped the way it is, and why visual poetry is now becoming so important. Is this? No, you don't need pictures to make it a visual medium. Even words can take that pictorial quality and do something to you. Because even here you can see units, just like in the comics we saw there were panels and gutters. Even here you can see those pictorial units. You can see separate units, and somehow they are interacting with each other, with the spaces between them to give us that sense of something that is happening, something that is supposed to be complete, yet it is not complete. There is that sense of incompleteness in it, which is perplexing. Now, the second reason why I chose to talk about this visual poetry is this. Well, I was thinking about, how this particular word postmodernism has often been cut into three parts: post, modern, and ism. While I was thinking about this, I thought, why not divide the word modern into further two parts, and maybe it will give me a better sense of what I am dealing with. And then I thought about it. Could I make that division? What difference would it make? And I found there was a difference. Post, as we know, it has often been debated that why this prefix post is attached, what connotations it has, whether postmodernism is a result or aftermath or afterbirth or development or a denial or rejection or a correspondence with or an operating system that refers to modernism. And then we come to mode, because I thought of dividing modern into two parts: mode and RN. Now, mode could have different meanings. So it could be a way or manner in which something is experienced, an option allowing a change in the method of operation of a device, like we say automatic mode, a way of using a system in computing, any of the distinct patterns of vibration of an oscillating system. In logic, it is the character of a modal proposition, whether something is possible, whether something is impossible, whether something is viable or not. Then it could also refer to a fashion or style in clothes, art, and literature. Or it could be the value that occurs most frequently in a given set of data. While we were doing statistics, something like that, this term came, if we remember. Then it has also a connection with music, a set of musical notes from which melodies and harmonies are constructed. So, all these aspects of the word mode, I would say, it is related to whatever we are thinking about, this, this thing that we have on our hands, postmodernism. Because often it is a thinking about thinking. So, that said, if I come to RN, I thought, what could it mean? And, the way we use language in the digital media, in WhatsApp, in texting, I found that RN, it refers to right now in the language of texting. So, what mode of existence are we in right now? So if right now is here in postmodernism, is post really a post, or we are still talking about modern? Is postmodernism, never able to transcend what we call modern? This is something we need to think about. And ism, of course, we investigate what is it. Is it something ideological? Is it something political? Is it something that refers to an action? Is it something that is compulsive? So just when I sat with this word, I thought of these things, and I had some more questions in mind. Now, let me go to the next point that I have to talk of. This picture that you see is actually the Barcelona Pavilion. It's a German pavilion for the 1929 International Exposition in Barcelona, Spain. Let me give you some data about it. The construction began in 1928, it was completed in 1929, and it was demolished in 1930 because it was supposed to be only part of an exhibition, something temporary. But what we are concerned with is that it was rebuilt in 1986, and that reconstruction has been controversial. There have been questions like, if this is a building which was reconstructed out of just photographs or sketches, how original it is? Can it ever be original? And if it is original because it has been made keeping in mind the earlier one, and this is going to stay, whereas that was something temporary and it has gone. So all these questions or controversies, they take us to that concept, or that thought problem, the ship of Theseus. Okay, something that was related to the metaphysical idea of being original. What is original? Now, the ship, as it deteriorated, to keep it intact, the parts, they were taken off. The parts that were rotting, they were taken off, and the new parts were added. So then the question arose, which ship is the original one? Those rotting parts that are there in fragments, or the new thing which has been made? Now, if after some years, using some technology, those rotten parts would be somehow, brought back, somehow brought back to a better state, and they would be put together again, and they would build a ship, then which ship would be the original one? The one with the original, once rotten parts, but now okay, that is the original ship? Or the ones with those parts that were not rotten but new parts added to it to make it okay, that ship is the original ship? This is something which we are trying to do, or which we are trying to find out, in all our deliberations on this aspect or aspects of postmodernism. Where lies the original? And what we are trying to do is also something related to a concept given by Descartes. And if you know about this, the piece of wax, how the properties of wax, which are constant, to find that out, the wax was taken near the fire, and then it was observed which are the things that change. The shape changes, the texture changes, the color changes, the the smell changes. But this motion, the properties that remain, this changeability, this movability, these are what make it still wax and not something else. So I would say whatever we are trying to do here, getting together, talking about this thing, if I may call it thing and not things, that we call postmodernism, whatever we are talking about, there is some kind of imaginative variation that we are doing. Let us leave this out and see if this stands as something stable. Let us leave this portion out and see if this entity stands stable. And if not, then they cannot be part of what we call, this particular concept or concepts of postmoderns. Okay, so with this particular architectural feature, I would want you to just think about, everything that we have either reconstructed or, put down, or we have toned down while we are making this transition historically. Anyway, historically there is a transition, and that is why we have added the word post. But then, where lies the original, is it on this side or is it on that side? So that is something which we need to think about. Now, before I just end, I would like to talk a bit about whatever I discussed about, panels, about gutters, about pain. Where is the connection? See, making a connection is not what we can absolutely say that we can make a connection, but that is what we are doing. We are trying to make that connection. So I would say that, that element of mystery, it surrounds pain, just as an element of mystery surrounds the gutter in a comic book. And that pain is not a puzzle. In a puzzle, if somebody gives us an answer, the puzzle would be solved. So it is not a puzzle, but rather it's a mystery, because a mystery is a mystery because of that veil which is there. So we cannot just, say that let us take out the veil and then we will see. Maybe there is nothing without that veil. And that is something we need to think of. See, when we talk about death, often when we think of pain, why is it so disturbing? Why is it so maddening? Because we have this tendency of linking pain with end, with death. And we see, what kind of images do we have of death in our minds? When we see a dead body in a shroud, we would think that the shroud has the responsibility of hiding that specter of death. But it does not hide. It actually makes things prominent. It actually makes that stillness, or that silence more palpable. The shroud does that. So if we think that we are trying to arrive somewhere, we need to question ourselves. We need to question, how do we perceive our lives? Do we feel that whatever is happening to us, whatever is happening around us, do we feel that it is actually a panel? This is the action that is happening here, whatever is happening to us, whatever we are doing, saying, not doing, thinking, not thinking. Is this part of a panel, an active panel? Or are we actually in a gutter where nothing seems to happen? This is a gutter between two panels which lie outside our perception, pre-birth and post-death. Maybe those two are the panels where the real action is happening, and this life that we perceive, we are actually in a gutter, and we can see that because as readers, we have only this place of nothingness to grapple with. And because we are only interested, this is where we must play our part. maybe this life that we see and these thoughts that we have, all this, they are just part of that gutter, seemingly uh, silent, but having sonic agency. So I would like to stop here and just I would like to listen to your thoughts, comments, or questions that you might have. Um, Let me just stop sharing it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It was such a wonderful, interesting, and unique session. We all have enjoyed it a lot, and it was such a unique topic. So, what should I say? The way you have taken us from sandcastles to the gutters to the pain of effacement, it is very unique thing. I am like enjoying it a lot, and thank you so much. Um, Now I think we need to move to the questionnaires.
Yeah, sure.
Participants, you can turn on your mic or video. You can ask any question.
There seemed to be a
There is
question.
there is a question from Angel Tess. Ma'am, can you please elaborate on the term eco-gothic?
Okay, so eco-Gothic is actually a term which refers to Gothic elements in an otherwise, normal. I would not dare to say normal without quotes because it is so layered. So, in a normal, otherwise normal ecological setting, but there would be some element that would beat understanding, that would question whatever is supposed to be natural. And this I used in connection with that particular graphic novel which I was referring to, Sandcastle, because the way everybody, and that happened to everybody who was present there on that beach that day. Okay, so it was a sort of enclosure, and everything seemed to be acting against them. All of them were aging at a rapid pace, and they could not come to terms with what was happening to them. They thought maybe it was part of a medical experiment, and maybe they were the subjects, and maybe this natural element had been tampered with just to go on with that experiment. They thought maybe some kind of discovery was to be made, and they were part of it. And if you watch that movie which has been made, the movie has gone a step further in giving a context, to how this particular thing can be explained, whatever was happening to them in that enclosure. In one moment we see children aged 6 or 8. The next moment, or if we turn a page or two, we would see that they would be grown up individuals, and they would not know that they are grown up, but their parents would recognize seeing them. They would still feel that they are children, but their body is growing up and everything about them is growing up. So why this thing is happening? There is no sensible explanation. They only try to make sense of it using language which seems to fail them at a certain point. So then, if there is nothing explainable about it, then we bring in the concept of uncanny. Okay, something which lies beyond our perception, something which we cannot explain in any way. So that is what we mean by eco-Gothic. When the setting is ecological, but whatever is happening, whatever is supposed to happen, is not part of that ecosystem, or is not natural. And that is what I mean by this term, eco-Gothic.
Thank you, ma'am. Um, you have answered so explicitly. Um, Anyone else? So I have a question while listening to you. When you were talking about every half hour is an equivalent to a year of our lives. Like how?
So that was the calculation. That the person who was talking, he was actually a science fiction writer. So he had this scientific awareness. So looking at the kids, right now they would seem 5 to 6 year olds. The next they would seem adults. So that looking at that span of growth, he made this calculation that here, whatever is happening to us, it seems that every half hour we are turning a year older, and that is why when we turn pages we see them getting older and older, and at the end everybody except that child, the picture which I showed you, the last page of the novel, where the child, she's actually a child, but then she's no more a child, she's a grown up girl trying to make a sand castle. She's the only one left, and maybe she will not be alive for a long time, because the way the pace is there, even she would move towards her end. Everybody else, they have died, and she's the only one left. So in order to make sense of whatever is happening there, because that was the thing that came naturally, people, that particular person who had died there itself in the sandcastle that he had made, that person is a doctor, and even his medicine, his scientific temper could have no explanation for whatever was happening there. So then, if there is something else, there is that element which beats all our attempts at explaining, then what is to be done? Then what do we call this life? Then how do we deal with that compulsion of living when we are face to face with nothingness?
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And while I was listening to you, there comes an analogy in my mind. Like when we were preparing for this conference, and we all were discussing for filling the gutter in between the conferences, that those activities that we have decided, so that we get a closure. I should say engagement of the audience. So
Yeah, that is something very brilliant which you have thought of. Because if we just look at the way the conference has been planned, the first session we were talking about guesthood. The second
yes,
session we were talking about those anxieties, those pangs which we want to reconcile with. And the third session, of course, dealt with confessionalism, and how do we look at confessionalism from the point of view of fractured cells. Then what I try to talk about, this space in between, this in
yes,
betweenness,
ma'am.
how
The
to
panels.
handle that in betweenness which we are almost always face to face with. Then the upcoming session, which will talk about this madness, right? Madness that is there, and how to grapple with that madness. And the last session which will be on myth, and how we are dealing with myths. What is a myth? Aren't we parts of a myth? You know, all these, if we look at them as panels, as you rightly said, then whatever we are doing in between, that is a way of negotiating between different ideas, and different strands of thought. So whatever we are doing in between, that is our attempts at making sense, and that is the most we can do, attempts at making sense of things.
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, everybody is so enthralled by your, this lecture, and I would like to read some comments from the comment box section. There is Iris Ramnani. This is a very nice and different topic. Um, Raj, Raj Amina Narayanan. Your interpretations are really modern, and it is indeed. I think there is Hemanti Bagichi. Thank you, ma'am, for elaborating the topic in such a unique way. It was so insightful. There is Urvashi Parmar. Thank you, ma'am, for this interest. It is an interesting session, ma'am. I am so impressed by your presence. I'm feeling very happy today. Richu, that landscape poem just thrilled my eyes. Can I get your comment on Cummings as a
Comings.
Cummings as a proponent of visual poetry?
Uh, yes, in fact, after talking about these words having a pictorial quality, I would not like to restrict this, saying that whenever we see pictures, only then we can say that this is a visual medium. This being aware of the potency of a visual medium, you can even perceive pictures where there seem to be none. So even if you are reading a poem, if you are reading, let us say, a work of fiction where you just see words, but those words will strike you in such a way that you would feel these are not words anymore. You would feel that you are actually looking at fragments, you are actually looking at pictorial fragments, and you would seem to be pulled into them. You would seem to be part of that art. So what you say is right, Richu. E. Cummings, especially because of the way language is used, we can definitely see images, we can definitely see pictures which are very potent and which draw us towards them, inviting us to take part in the action that is happening, inviting us to refashion whatever entities or units that we encounter there. So I would say, visual, looking at things visually is not restricted to eyes, because we can have pictures in our minds and words, even if they are not arranged pictorially like in this particular poem. They can give you a sense of pictures, and hence that taking part in a visual narrative.
Ma'am, one more thing, the way you have, the divide postmodernism, and there was a part RN right now. That was, that has been always been there, RN, but no one has realized, I should say,
Yeah,
yet.
even it struck me like when I was looking at going through some books, I saw that always these three divisions are made: post, modern, and ism.
Ism.
Then I thought that what more could we say about this? Could there be anything more? Then I just started looking at that word modern, and somehow it seemed to split. Just like I realized when I was reading something about Archimedes, and that word eureka was written, in a way, very prominently, and I could just hear that word wreck more than the word eureka. The word wreck, it struck me. So I thought, if that was the word that is striking me, then where do I go? Because eureka does not have that sense of positivity for me. I can only hear that word wreck. So then there must be something about how these things are, these fissures are there, these fractures are there, which seem to happen almost at every moment. We just need to be aware of them, because that is what I say. Whatever we see in a comic book, we see fissures. Actually, those panels, they fracture the time and space. So what we are doing in between those panels is something really important, because you see, many times we feel that whatever we cannot perceive does not exist. We feel like that, and it's very true. If we cannot perceive something, how should we accept that something exists? But then we cannot negate that it is not there because we don't see it. Maybe it is not visible only to invite us to come and try to see it.
Okay. So what I have noticed is our world is getting broadened. The fragments and the gutters simultaneously is getting broadened, and we humans we have we have um, enclosed ourselves in a shell, or I should say that shell is named as technology,
Mm.
mobile phones. We have we are spending so much time on our mobile phone so that we can interact with the world, which is and even we are interacting with the whole world, and still we are not feeling happy, we are not feeling satisfied. And this was the reason, I think during lockdown there was a lot of depression cases, because at that time we have basically realized that we need to fill these gutters, which are still there, but we need to find those gaps so that we can complete this fragment.
See,
And
what you say is interesting, Shableen, because when I talked of Sandcastle, even there, they are made up of separate entities, like each sand granule is separate. And the thing that enables it to be a structure, a castle, is that bridge, which is there because of this thing called surface tension, which is actually the force that keeps water molecules together. Otherwise, water molecules won't be together. So because of that surface tension, this bridge is created. So if we, as I said, if there is more of water, then it will dissolve the whole thing. So it needs to be exact. Okay. So
yes.
the thing is, whatever we are doing with social media, whatever we are doing with internet, we think that it is giving us those kinds of bridges. We think that it is actually bridging the gap, but is it? That is what we have to question. Because, if that precision is not there, then of course sandcastles will be destroyed. Of course, relationships will be destroyed. Of course, our ideas of ourselves will be destroyed. They are, as it is being destroyed, and we are in a process of finding whatever we want to find. But the thing is that precision, I don't know how it is achievable. That this is the amount that we need. Less or more will just topple the whole thing over. That is something that we need to think about. How do we,
Yes.
in an age where everything seems to be porous, where everything seems to be fractured, how can we be precise? That is the thing.
Okay, and I think this is a reason that you have introduced that part of the digital poetry, like how poetry's patterns have changed now, so that they can get the attention of audience. And I think that was amazing and wonderful session, and especially that I've also liked that part, the way you have taken us from deforestation to afforestation via those sand castles, and that was also very interesting. And I think we all have enjoyed this session a lot. And now I think I'm officially concluding this session. And
Thank you, everyone who is
I,
here.
I would like to thank you, all the participants, for their participation, and special thanks to you, ma'am, for such an insightful and intellectual session of postmodern castle. The way you have taken us from all those castles, gutters, to the pain of effacement, which is also very interesting. Like the way we are broadening over castles, but still we have no idea where we are in. And after this session, I think so many questions have been answered, and some of them are still in loop, which we are still struggling to find out. And in that case, I would like to quote what Jean-Luc Godard said: "It's not where you take things from; it's where you take them to." And I think it is the high time we need to take all this thought to somewhere to its closure. So thank you so much, everyone. Now we are moving to